What's up, fellas? My name is Tucker, and this week is the start of NBA free agency. This video, I'm going to go through every single important team and player and preview the entirety of NBA free agency. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like rating on it. Check out my socials right here. Let's go and get started. Okay, first let's go through a couple of really important and notable teams when it comes to having a lot of cap space, being really involved in free agency, and then we'll get to most of the really important players here. So teams, really quickly, the New Orleans Pelicans, they dumped some cap space in that draft trade to go from pick 10 down to pick 17. They dumped Steven Adams, they dumped Eric Bledsoe, they got Jonas Valanciunas, but more importantly, they saved themselves a ton of money for this upcoming season, opening up over $30 million in cap space. And reportedly, their big target at the moment is someone like Kyle Lowry, but if that doesn't happen, New Orleans is going to be really active, whether it be re-signing Lonzo Ball and Josh Hart, whether it be going out to get veterans to add to this roster. They really feel like they're on the clock with Zion Williamson, and they need to start producing results soon. And soon apparently means next season they're going to be looking to sign some veterans, and they're certainly going to have plenty of cap space to be able to do so. Next up, the Dallas Mavericks, another team that just dumped a contract. Just yesterday, they sent Josh Richardson to Boston in exchange for Moses Brown, essentially just putting Josh Richardson into that trade exception that Boston had from the Gordon Hayward signing a year ago. That saves them about $11 million in cap space and gets them in that $30+ million range as well. Keep in mind, this offseason, 2021, was supposed to be the Giannis offseason. So teams like Dallas, teams like Miami that we're going to talk about in a second, they have planned on creating cap space for this offseason all along. And so it's not surprising to see them making some moves, trying to open up that space. Even without Giannis here, there's a ton of good players, and each of these teams are really looking to make a leap next season. Dallas is one of those. They're going to be in on Kyle Lowry. They're going to be making some calls, about someone like Chris Paul, Kawhi Leonard. They're going to try and go out and get somebody to fit alongside Luka Doncic, since the Kristaps Porzingis thing clearly is not working out the way that they hoped it would. Keep an eye on Dallas. Next up, Miami. Much more complicated to create the space. They are able to create right around that $30 million in salary cap space number this offseason. However, it's a little bit more difficult to do so. They would have to decline the team options on both Goran Dragic and Andre Iguodala, which isn't the end of the world for them, but then they have to deal with the cap holds of Duncan Robinson, Kendrick Nunn, and Victor Oladipo. All three of those guys are free agents this offseason, two of which are restricted free agents, and they would have to, either sign Robinson and Nunn to deals that are team friendly or renounce the rights on those guys. The cap hold on Robinson isn't that big of a deal. It's not that big, so they can still go out and sign somebody for 20 plus, but you'd have to deal with Oladipo. Do you want to bring him back or not? Kendrick Nunn, and again, declining the Iguodala and the Dragic team options as well. It's a very complicated and a complex situation, one that I'm interested to see kind of how it develops throughout the week. Last up now in the team section is, of course, the New York Knicks. They have full max cap space. They have plenty of space. They only have about $50 million in payroll total for next season, so they can go out and throw a ton of money at various players. However, they have some things to keep in mind as well. Julius Randle is going to need an extension. He's going into the last year of his contract. They need to figure out what they want to do with the long term of their payroll there with Julius Randle. And Derrick Rose is a free agent this offseason as well. Looks like there's mutual interest between him and the team to him returning next year on a deal that shouldn't be prohibitive to them getting a big-time free agent this offseason, but they need guards, they need perimeter playmaking, and that's going to be something they're going to be taking a look at, trying to grab this offseason. And again, another team that looks like they're in on Kyle Lowry, just like seemingly the entirety of the league. But now, let's get to the fun part, right? Let's get to the players. The big-time players that could be on the move in free agency. The big three names in this free agency class are Kawhi Leonard, Chris Paul, and then to a lesser extent, Mike Conley. I think all three of those guys are staying. Every indication we have at the moment is that all three of those guys are staying. Kawhi and Chris Paul, there's been some rumors floated at various points, but especially now that the Lakers have Russell Westbrook, and logistically it's just difficult to see Chris Paul going anywhere else unless Phoenix doesn't step up with an offer that Chris Paul thinks is commensurate with his performance this most recent season, and he gets offended by that and wants to leave. It seems like Paul is coming back. I'd be shocked if Kawhi Leonard left. And then Mike Conley, it seems like, is already preparing to accept a deal from Utah. I believe I saw 3 years, 75. Utah's been dumping some salary to kind of get down, not under the luxury tax, but to lower their luxury tax bill as they dumped Derek Favors earlier in the week. Now we get to the guys that could actually be on the move, though. And the biggest one is Kyle Lowry. The assumption up to this point for Toronto, and one of the reasons they didn't trade Lowry during the year to, for example, LA, there was a trade package offered where they could have sent him to the Lakers and gotten back like Kuzma and KCP, kind of similar to the Russell Westbrook trade package, was that they thought they could sign and trade him this offseason for value, because Lowry can certainly go out and sign with whoever, but some of the teams that could just outright sign him aren't at the top of the championship contention level that maybe he would want to be at to win a title. So the Lakers, the Clippers, teams like that would be able to just sign and trade for Lowry. He takes a little bit of a pay cut in comparison to what he could have gotten on the open market, but Toronto gets value back rather than just losing Lowry for nothing. But what's developed over the last couple of days is teams like Dallas, teams like New Orleans, opening up not just $15, $20 million in cap space, but having $30 million to throw at Kyle Lowry. When you compare 30 to go to Dallas or New Orleans compared to 10 or 15 to go to an LA team in a sign and trade, that's a big difference if you're someone like Kyle Lowry. And so it seems more and more likely at this point that he could be signing an outright deal with someone like New Orleans, Dallas, Miami, New York, teams like that, rather than a sign and trade. I don't really know if that's something I would be all that interested in doing. If I'm a team like New Orleans, $30 million for Kyle Lowry, let's just say it's 3 years, 90, that's a lot. But some teams see this as like a Chris Paul effect type situation where they bring in a veteran point guard in Lowry that has championship experience that can elevate the rest of the roster. And as I said with New Orleans, they're recognizing that they really need to elevate this roster quickly. I for the most part, would keep an eye on either Miami or Dallas here with Lowry. I just don't know if the Pelican fit works super well for him to go from Toronto to New Orleans with just a relative amount of uncertainty there. I feel like it's more certain that Dallas and Miami are going to be good next year rather than New Orleans, but that's a player to continue to keep an eye on. Next up, DeMar DeRozan. The current buzz around him is that there's a significant possibility he's going to go to the Lakers. Now, that would entail a significant pay cut from DeMar DeRozan, just as it would for any free agent that would be going to LA post-Russell Westbrook trade. They don't have the space to sign anybody outright. They have to use their mid-level and their minimum exceptions. But they're also very close to being hard capped, so it makes it very difficult for them to do anything other than sign DeRozan to a mid-level exception that would be worth somewhere in the range of $6 to $10 million. But with where they're at payroll-wise, it's a little bit unclear because the Westbrook trade can't actually go through until this week. So the specifics on that are a little bit murky. But for DeRozan, it would basically come down to, do I want to go to LA to play with Russ, LeBron, and AD, or do I want to go and get 15 to 20 million a year from a team like Dallas, from a team like New Orleans, from a team like Miami that maybe misses out on their first couple of choices in free agency and then wants to throw a bigger number at DeRozan than maybe they would have initially? I don't know if that market is going to develop for DeRozan. If it doesn't, it seems like the Lakers are the biggest possibility here for him. That's what I would personally predict at this point, is that he would end up on the Lakers for a pretty significant pay cut. But like I said, you never know. A team could come out of nowhere with a bigger offer because they just feel like they need to go and get somebody. And DeMar DeRozan is certainly a good enough player, to get 15 to 20 million on the open market with some of the teams that do have cap space this offseason. Next up, speaking of the Lakers, Dennis Schroeder. Similar situation to Kyle Lowry, where I think the expectation was the Lakers were going to sign and trade Dennis Schroeder to somebody, maybe to get DeRozan, to get somebody else. That is significantly more difficult now post-Russell Westbrook trade, again, because of some of the mechanics involved with the hard cap. It's just way more difficult for the Lakers to trade Dennis Schroeder for someone that brings back value for them. Not to mention, I'm not sure there are many teams around the league that are super excited about giving up assets to get Dennis Schroeder when they could just sign him outright for a deal probably in the $10 to $15 million a year range. He's going to have to wait for the other free agency guard dominoes to drop, DeRozan, Lowry, Conley, before he can really step up and kind of have his moment here, because I think that he's certainly kind of pushed himself towards the back of the line here, where guys like Lowry are just going to get more priority in the open market. He should get something. Maybe he ends up in New York. Maybe they don't end up with Kyle Lowry or somebody like that, but Schroeder's going to get some money. I don't think it's going to be a sign and trade, and I think he's just going to kind of have to wait and see where all the other dominoes fall and then kind of pick his spot from there. Next up now, Lonzo. Tons and tons of Lonzo Ball buzz at all times. Over the last 6 months, all we're hearing about is where Lonzo Ball could possibly be going. It doesn't seem like there's a ton of interest for him to return to New Orleans, and if he did come back, it would just be New Orleans' way of salvaging the asset and not losing him for nothing. Their priority obviously lies with other players, and more specifically other guards, guys like Kyle Lowry. But if that doesn't materialize, they have the option to match any offer that is thrown at Lonzo Ball in free agency. And there's going to be some coming from Chicago, Boston, maybe Dallas, maybe Miami, maybe the Knicks, all these different teams that have $15 to $20 million potentially in cap space. Boston can make something like that happen. Chicago can make something like that happen. It just depends on how motivated the Pelicans are to retaining Lonzo and to matching that offer. If we open up free agency and the Pelicans sign Kyle Lowry to a 3-year, $90 million deal, I would feel much more confident that Lonzo would end up somewhere like Boston or like Chicago, in the very beginning parts of free agency, because then at that point, New Orleans doesn't need to match that offer and really increase their payroll in a significant way. They already got the guard that they feel like is going to elevate their roster. And so whether it's in a sign and trade or otherwise, they're much more willing to lose Lonzo Ball in that scenario. Another guy to keep an eye on. Next up, another free agent guard. There's a ton of them. Again, we're kind of waiting on a couple of these dominoes to fall, and it's Spencer Dinwiddie. The rumors up until the last couple of days were that he was going to end up on an LA team. That was his primary goal. But again, with Russell Westbrook now in LA, that's more difficult. And for the Clippers, there would have to be a sign and trade possibility. And again, that gets a little bit more difficult. So I really don't know where Dinwiddie's going to end up. A team like Miami would be interesting. A team like the Knicks would be interesting. The only thing that it feels like right now is that with the Nets dealing with guys like Bruce Brown and Jeff Green and Blake Griffin as free agents, there's a lot of difficulty for them to potentially retain Spencer Dinwiddie. It doesn't seem like that's all that likely. So he kind of seems like a guy without a team right now, but he should get at least $10 to $12 million a year from somebody, even coming off an injury, because he is a talented perimeter guard. It just kind of depends on, again, where all these other dominoes fall. And then the last group here to really pay attention to that's really interesting this offseason are the restricted free agency guys. Jared Allen looks like he's pretty likely to stay in Cleveland on what's going to be a pretty significant deal and form a front court combination with him and Evan Mobley. Lauri Markkanen is a guy that could potentially be involved in that Lonzo sign and trade, where you have a very rarely seen restricted free agency sign and trade. If he does end up leaving Chicago, I think there's going to be some interest in him. John Collins looks like he's pretty likely to go back to Atlanta on a significant deal. Not a max deal, but a ton of money for John Collins. Doesn't look like he's going anywhere. And then Duncan Robinson, as I mentioned earlier, a pivotal player when it comes to the Miami Heat free agency this offseason, because he's a very good player, one of the better shooters in the league, someone that they would like to retain, but they've got a lot of things to juggle this offseason when it comes to their payroll. And he might slip through the cracks a little bit and end up on a different team, but potentially be part of a sign and trade package. Him, along with Tyler Hero, whatever the case may be, could potentially get them something this offseason if they chose to. There are certainly more players to take a look at in free agency, but these are the biggest players and teams that I wanted to take a look at. Hope you guys enjoyed it. That's our big free agency preview for the week. And then throughout the week, I'll be getting in maybe some predictions tomorrow. And then, of course, reacting to all the deals all week long. Keep an eye out for those videos. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, like I said, leave a like rating on the video. Once again, my name is Tucker. Hope you guys have an awesome rest of your Sunday, and I will see you all next time.